7 to 8. So if you can just be silent, please. Thank you. All right. Good evening, everybody. Just let me know if you can hear me okay. Awesome. Thank you. So as we begin, we'll go ahead and we'll join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. And you can put the palms down. So welcome to Intro to Buddhism and Meditation. Oh, excuse me. Good timing. Welcome to those of you who are here for the first time. There's a chat box there somewhere on your screen, and I always like to start just kind of with a question while everybody's getting settled. Thanks, Samir. And I think the question I'll start with for tonight is any challenges you faced today that you did well with. If you don't want to kind of give a long answer, you can just put yes or anything you'd like. But let's just start with any challenge you were faced with today that you did well with. And, we're surrounded by so much negativity these days. And so I think it's always good to just explore things that are positive and good in our lives. So we'll take a couple minutes. Again, if you're new to YouTube, you can go ahead and just chime in on the chat box somewhere. I'm going to step away for just about 30 seconds. But again, the question is any challenges you've faced today that you did well with? And I'll be right back. All right. I see lots of yeses. Asking my boss for something I want. She said yes. Yeah, it can be scary sometimes asking for things you want, and pleasantly surprised when you get what you want. I didn't lose any patience in situations where I normally do. That's also wonderful. Sorry, I just had a few things pop up right as we were getting started here. Let's see. I did well with focus and motivation. Always a challenge. I work for a labor union, and our members are faced with the library reopening services with no plan or protocol. That sounds like a lot of fun. Scares about PPE, sanitation, etc., childcare. Yeah, those are difficult. We're challenged these days with a lot, and your emotions can get the best of you if you're not careful. So, good thoughts. Anything else before we start with a meditation practice. Anything that you were challenged with that you did well with today. Lizzie, release from ICU. Beautiful. Um, Glad you're doing well. Yeah, ICU, hospital settings are wonderful places for meditation practice. Glad you're home. Glad you're safe. Um, Alexander, making it through the workday and not letting it ruin the rest of my day. Yeah, that's a challenge too. Sometimes just waking up is difficult and getting out of bed is difficult. So, um, I think the overarching theme here that I see a lot is just finding motivation. And for me, it's always about having passion for whatever you do. So, regardless of what your day is like, every one of us sitting here is filled with so many different things that occur in our days. But can we stay focused? Can we stay motivated? Can we have passion? And when I look at the Buddhist teachings on diligence, this was the last thing he said before he died. He said, be diligent, strive on with diligence. And so I remind myself that every day, that no matter how many difficulties or challenges you face, that just be diligent and keep working. So, all right, so we'll go ahead and get started with the meditation practice. For those of you who are maybe joining us for the first time, um, a reminder for the rest of you, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. You're not going to figure anything out whatsoever. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. You're not trying to stop your thoughts. You're just trying to observe them as they arise and sit with them as they pass and returning attention and focus to sensation of breath. You won't think nothing. Often people think that meditation is about going blank. You're not going to go blank. We're just going to sit and breathe. You'll hear sounds. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and this practice is learning to get quiet and still within the chaos. So, posture, just finding a position that's comfortable. If you're on a cushion, helps sliding to the front third, pushing your stomach forward, allows the back to straighten, shoulders are relaxed, hands can be in the knees or in the lap. If you're on a chair or a bench or a couch or whatever you're sitting on, just try to sit up straight. You want to be comfortable, but not so comfortable that you kind of sink in and fall asleep. So we're trying to wake up, not go to sleep. I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important with this practice is don't expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And eventually, you'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Knowing throughout the practice, you'll hear sounds inside the room or outside. These are not distractions, not disruptions, simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. We'll start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest, and breathing in, feel them rise, and breathing out, they fall. Simply going to continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgments from the practice, just sitting, breathing, keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. Breathing in, follow breath in, breathing out, follow breath out. learning to be comfortable in stillness, quiet, simply sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe, knowing with each breath there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, no one else to be. Everything beautiful, just as it is, sitting, breathing, and 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as your eyes after, compare this to how you typically recognize the difference, if there is one, and ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to the world around you. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. And this is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered. Why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena, What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where we come from or what we believe in or where we think we're going, our whole life is filled with things that happen. We react. More stuff happens, more reactions. This is life. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. For most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. Meditation is not an escape. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing. Be kind to yourself. Practice of diligence is most critical when it comes to whatever journey you're on, and the effort that we put in towards everything, regardless of what you're doing. Right intention with right effort, and be diligent at it. If you set your mind to do something, you start on a certain journey, certain path, and do it. Right intention is that it's coming from a place of love and kindness and compassion, wisdom, and that it's coming from a place that will be a benefit for all beings. That it doesn't come from a place of anger or greed or ignorance or ego, but that it's a selfless path and a selfless practice. And with that intention and a diligent effort, you can do beautiful things. So, with that, I'd like to, as always, just open up to questions. I prefer to spend the rest of the evening responding to your questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that's on your mind. Um, Again, if you're new, welcome. There's a chat box there somewhere on your screen, and you can just type in a question. Uh, so Chuck's first question, what is love? I think the word is going to mean different things to different people. Um, but when I look at the heart of Buddhist teachings, there's really two wings to Buddhist teachings, wisdom and compassion. And to me, compassion is what love is, but it's compassion or love in a non-attached way. It's being able to have love and compassion for all people and places and things exactly as they are. It's understanding. I think love has a lot to do with understanding. Compassion has a lot to do with understanding that what it would take to love everyone is you have to understand that they're all coming from a different place, a different view, a different perspective. And I think the Buddhist teachings and most of the great religious leaders, for that matter, are talking about a very pure, endless, boundless love and compassion that is free of ego, free of selfish motivations. It's free of this idea that we are superior and more important than others. And again, I used this word earlier, but I think you can't have love and compassion without understanding. So those are a few thoughts on love. It's going to be different things to different people. But often people ask, what is ultimate wisdom? And I always say, well, the opposite of wisdom uh, is ignorance. And the Buddha taught to overcome ignorance, practice wisdom. So instead of thinking, what is ultimate wisdom? I'm very well aware of my own ignorance. So I use kind of the same thing as what is love. For me, instead of trying to define exactly what love is, become very aware of when you act from a place of things that are not love. And that's usually pretty easy to determine. We might not know what a perfect wisdom or perfect love or perfect compassion might be. But we're usually pretty aware when we're the opposite of that. So hope that's helpful. What if you can't find motivation to do the things you need to do? Well, then my first suggestion is, and let me back up a little bit more. Um, and you're welcome, just you're welcome. Um, the story that I touched on very briefly earlier of the Buddha. So he was 80 years old and he was about to die, and he was on his deathbed, so to speak. And all of his disciples were upset because they were worried about who was going to teach them now. They thought their great master, their great teacher was dying. Now, what are they going to do? And he said, I've left you the teachings. He spent 45 years teaching. So that's a long time. He taught love and compassion for 45 years. And they said, who's going to teach us now? And he said, well, I've left you the teachings, strive on with diligence and be a light unto yourself. So this idea of not finding motivation to do the things you need to do, I think from a very practical standpoint, first try to find motivation to do things that you like to do. We're getting into semantics here, but when I read things you need to do, I don't read it as things that you like to do. And I think motivation can first be cultivated by having motivation for things that we like and enjoy and that we find pleasure in doing, and begin to know what that feeling of motivation is like. And then when it comes to things that you need to do, the Buddha taught very clearly that we suffer, we struggle because of our sense of self and our pride and our ego. And often when it's things that we need to do versus things that we want to do, um, our ego's in play here. I don't want to do this because I don't like this, but I need to do it because so and so relies on me. So make it not about you. If you can take away the ego and you take away the self and you take away the pride, and you're just present with what's happening and you abandon the stories of likes or dislikes and judgments of this versus that, then you can just be present with what's happening and not judge people or places or things or situations. And if you can just be present with things that you need to do, then the motivation is there, but ultimately the motivation doesn't even need to be there because you're just present with what you need to do. When there's something we need to do and we have to, the way you ask the question, find motivation for things you need to do. I just hear it as things that you don't like. And if we can remove this idea of doing things that we like or don't like and just do what's present, if you have a job, maybe you don't like your job, but you need to do it. Why do you need to do it? Because you want to support whoever it is you want to support. So remove all the stories around it and just be present with your work. So I think motivation can come from being present with things as they are and abandoning the stories that we're telling ourselves. How do we undo an identity built around anxiety, having dealt with anxiety for so long? Um, this story that we tell ourselves um, isn't real. If you ask 20 people to describe you or talk about you, they would describe you in completely different ways. So the identity that you've built around anxiety is you've told yourself over and over and over again, I'm anxious, I'm anxious, I'm anxious. For someone who deals with stress or anxiety and they sit down to do a meditation to overcome stress and anxiety, and all they do is repeat to themselves, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I'm anxious. Well, you're not going to get rid of stress and anxiety by focusing on it. So in many ways, similar to what I talked about before, which is undoing this identity around anxiety, is to try not to tell yourself how anxious you are. But again, to stay present. When we feel stress or anxiety or fear or worry, our mind is very often in the future. We're worried about what's coming up. I'm anxious about how this is going to work out. I'm stressed out about job, about bills, about everything that's going on in the world today. We're worried about the future. That's what the cause of going to the future. Now, the other fun thing we do is our mind wanders to the past. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? How did how come I did this? Why did they do that? And then we're wrapped up in anger, we're wrapped up in depression, we're wrapped up in sadness. So, for whatever reason, people often are constantly thinking about the past, and that's where anger and sadness and depression lies, or they're thinking about the future, and that's where stress and anxiety and fear lie. So, work on abandoning the story. When you say you've built an identity around it, that sounds like a lot of years you've been dealing with anxiety. But if you're just present in each moment, and that's why the meditation, this isn't easy, folks. This is not like, okay, quick and done. But if you learn to stay present with what is, right now, I am just here. I'm doing this right now. I don't even know if I'm going to wake up tomorrow. Why would I be anxious about 5 years from now? I don't know what's going to happen 10 minutes from now or 10 seconds from now. So for me, this practice from someone very personally who always liked to control situations and outcomes and try to control people and places and things, that was exhausting. And all the anxiety and fears and worries about how the future was going to be, and spending my entire life trying to craft it and manipulate it and shape it to control it. Abandon self, abandon ego, abandon control. Learn to be present with life as it is. The conditions that you have created based on your choices, your words, your actions have put you in this moment. Try to stop telling yourself stories about who you think you are and just be whoever you are in this moment, doing whatever you're doing in this moment. You don't have to undo anything. That's just a big story you're telling yourself, anyways. So hopefully that's helpful. I know lots of people who struggle and suffer with stress and anxiety, and it can be really torture. It really can. So I, appreciate you asking that question, and I know it's not easy, but yeah, you might want to tell yourself some good things about yourself too. Nobody ever asks the question, how do I undo the identity of telling myself I'm a good person? Nobody ever does that. I don't know. How do you develop compassion for someone who has previously given you grief? Yeah, I mean, again, I like to turn things around and recognize that uh, for me, if I want to try to develop compassion for someone who's given me grief, I just have to ask myself, have I ever given anyone else grief? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. For so many years and so many times and so many people, I've given them so much grief. Why? Because I was greedy or angry or ignorant. I was coming from a place of pride and ego and self and thinking I was more important or I was better than they were or I deserved more. It was all about me, 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 me. And so I gave them grief. That was my ignorance, my anger, my suffering. So if somebody else is giving you grief, then they're coming from their place of anger or suffering or whatever it may be, right? There are dogs right now. They're either suffering or they're talking. We don't know. They're communicating. That's how they do it. Sometimes you just have to listen to the dogs bark. It's just what's happening. I could tell stories about it. I could get anxious about it. I could get bothered by it. I could get frustrated by it. Or I can just recognize this is what's happening in this moment. That's it. And I think if you can, coming back to the developing compassion, if you can recognize that moment that someone, that you say someone has previously given you grief, right? Well, again, reflect on the times that you did that to somebody else And what you really needed was compassion. If you felt the love and compassion from someone else during the moments that you were giving someone grief, then maybe you would have stopped giving them grief. So cultivating compassion for others who grief is beneficial for you and for them. Because the anger and hatred that you carry is just, it'll destroy you. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, Zoom life. Other questions? Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with? Other thoughts, questions, comments? And I talk about this a lot, but I think anxiety, fears, it, it really boils down a lot to this idea that we just want to control the way everything is. And when you completely surrender to trying to control anything or anyone, um, I think that's the key to liberation, to freedom, peace of mind. And one thing I realized, and I say this kind of expression a lot, but years ago I stopped expecting anything from anyone, um, ever. So, as I say, I don't expect anything from anyone ever. And that, to me, I learned really kind of through practice, experience, but specifically the teachings of the Heart Sutra, to go beyond expectations. So, and that doesn't mean that you just give up and watch people do things that are harmful. You're fully engaged. You absolutely care about the way things are. You are just able to engage in them without expecting anything from anyone. That way, when you're faced with conflict, when you're faced with disagreements, um, you can do it with this like very stern, keen sense of wisdom. So if somebody verbally attacks you, you can respond without emotionally being destroyed because you're not expecting them to be any different. When I see people act out of what I'd consider ignorance, I don't expect them to be any differently. I hope they would be different. It would be nice to be different. I don't expect them to be anyway. I don't know anything about them. So for me, that's helped. Um, how to deal with ambition? Is ambition another form of trying to control situations? That's a good question, and I think again, the word semantics. It depends on, and this is the challenge of doing these things over Zoom. Um, it depends on what ambition means to you. It, Often people think that that Buddhist practice or that people meditate that you just kind of float around and do nothing all day and you lose all ambition, and that's not the case at all. um, to me, I think of ambition again as effort, and the Buddhist teachings, effort but without tied to the outcome. So the Buddhist teachings, the Four Noble Truths in brief, and you can Google this for free, it's really simple. to read, hard to practice. It's your entire life's practice. But the first one is life is filled with dukkha, suffering, that we all struggle and suffer. The second one is what's the cause? And he said the cause is greed, anger, ignorance. The third one he says is, okay, well, then there's an ending to this, and that's liberation or freedom from suffering. And the fourth one is the path. And the path is called the Eightfold Path. And these 8 steps are having correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. So the effort, the diligence, the ambition, these things are really important. You know, Buddha talks a lot about, cravings and desires lead to suffering. So from suffering is a healthy craving or desire to be a little bit happier, calmer, more peaceful. None of us would be here right now, including myself. So that's your but when you add the trying to control situations, the challenge is, can you put in the effort and the diligence and the ambition without the expectation of the outcome? So can you work hard at something without being attached to the result? And in that situation, specifically to your question, is ambition another form of trying to control situations? No, not at all. Have right effort, be diligent for the simple fact of being diligent, not because you hope you get something out of it. If you get something out of it, then you're really attached to the outcome. And this practice is about learning to stay present. Let's see. On the topic of not having expectations, how do you have expectations of reasonable effort? How do you not have expectations? This, I mean, you can't put. Well, you can do anything you want, but you know, it, it's like it's very easy to say, well, I don't expect anything from strangers, but those loved ones, I expect them to do everything I want them to. You know, they're going to engage and try to control them and get them to respond to you in the way you want, um, is not for you to control. All you can focus on is what is your effort and how do you respond to other people? How are you in a relationship? What do you bring? How much presence do you have with the other individual? And whatever they bring, they bring. You can expect things all day long, but you know, expectations are just going to lead you to um, judging the other person. And when you go back to the question earlier about what is love, to me, love is going beyond judgment. And now that doesn't mean that if you're in a relationship and you have these ideals of how you want the relationship to be, and as you say, they are not meeting your expectations, that doesn't mean you stay in unhealthy, toxic relationships. Just because people are behaving a certain way doesn't mean it's not, you know, the Buddhist path is not about sitting still when you're in unhealthy dynamics. Be wise enough to remove yourself from a situation if necessary. But the question of how do you not have expectations of reasonable effort from a significant other? My question to you is, why would you have expectations of them? Because you're only setting yourself up for disappointment. They are either going to bring to a relationship what you want or not, and you choose how to deal with that. But to throw expectations onto other people, I don't think is fair. If your relationship is good enough to where both people have a healthy understanding that sometimes you'll agree, sometimes you won't, um, then and you're able to communicate about that, then really, again, the expectations fall away. And I really, when I look at Buddhist teachings, I really tie all of this back to everything I'm talking about right now. For me, I'm just breaking down in my own way what absolute non attachment is. Non-attachment doesn't mean you don't care, you don't love. It means you absolutely love them, you absolutely care about them, and you absolutely understand that they are going to bring to a relationship all that they can bring. You now have the choice. Do I want to engage in this relationship or not? So, and we'll do one more here question if you want before we wrap up. All right, so I'll go ahead and close on that. We'll go ahead and join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. So, just a few quick announcements. Thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 14 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. So, every night we have different practices going on. We've been closed since March 12th, but about 90% of our schedule is online. So, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, myself, Travis, Alex, we do classes on YouTube, and then we have everything else on Zoom. Um, our recovery classes, our college classes, our kids' classes, all um, online. Go to the website, dharmabums.org. You'll see the schedule. Everything we do is free. We're not teachers and masters or gurus or monks or nuns. We're just practitioners. We do our best to share our teachings with those who show up. So we appreciate you showing up. If I never see you again, think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. Please be safe, be kind, wear a mask, and do what you can to help others. So thanks for being here. Hope to see you soon.